Hello, I'm Sharon Tong. You're watching In Parliament. Parliament has passed amendments to the Casino Control Bill. Wrapping up the debate, which began yesterday, Second Minister for Home Affairs, S. Iswaran, acknowledged the strong and diverse views expressed by members. He said the government had made the commitment to put in place a strong regulatory framework when they had decided to go ahead with the integrated resorts, and this commitment and determination remains till today. Addressing suggestions to scrap the annual entry levy, Mr. Iswaran said the significant upfront cost of an annual entry levy does deter those without the means from purchasing such annual levies. Of the total number of entry levies, comprising annual entry levies and daily entry levies, purchased by locals in 2011, less than 1% arose from annual entry levies.
The entry levy system is just one part of our entire framework of social safeguard measures, which includes exclusion orders, targeted measures for the financially vulnerable, and soon, if the bill is passed, visit limits. These will apply whether one pays an annual or daily levy.
The Minister said that the annual levy is also in a way designed for them. The confusion is caused when you know, on one side you have the day levy, which is $100. On the other side, the annual levy, when you divide it by 265, is about $550. If the annual levy is meant for the premium player, then it shouldn't be called a safeguard.
In most regimes, they don't pay to go to their casinos. So whether you pay $100 or $2,000, that is part of a social safeguard regime.
Addressing concerns on safeguards for gambling beyond the casino, Mr. Iswaran, who is also the Second Minister for Trade and Industry, said the government has commenced a review of its regulatory framework and social safeguards for non-casino gambling, including online gambling.
Online gambling, including gambling on social media platforms and mobile devices, is growing in many countries. Many of the emerging online gaming products are also potentially more addictive. Our objective remains the same. It is to preserve our values of thrift and hard work and to protect our society, especially the vulnerable, from the potential harms of gambling.
Mr. Iswaran added the value proposition of the two IRs lie in the economic benefits that they bring and their role in making Singapore a vibrant and dynamic economy. Today, the two integrated resorts hire more than 22,000 employees. Of these, 70% are locals, Singapore citizens and PRs, and of these, 80% are Singapore citizens. About 80% of the IR's contracts were also awarded to local companies in a variety of sectors.
The IRs will have to continually reinvest and upgrade all aspects of their operations in order to ensure they are internationally competitive as tourist destinations. The performance of the IRs in their non-gaming facilities and attractions will be made explicit as a factor to be considered by CRA in the renewal of a casino license. This is being provided for explicitly because hitherto we have focused more on the social and the legal and law and order compliance issues.
Mr. Iswaran said the aim is to keep the IRs as an important piece of Singapore's tourism offering in the coming years. But he also reassured members that the IRs are not the only plan to grow Singapore's tourism sector or economy.
The two integrated resorts contribute about 1.5 to 2% of our gross domestic product. That's based on the first 2 years of numbers. The 22,400 employees employed by the IRs comprise about 0.7% of our total labour force, or about 2% if you include the other 40,000 jobs created elsewhere. Similarly, the gaming taxes comprise a small fraction of the government revenues. These are hardly the basis on which government should have fiscal addiction to revenues from the IRs. Mr. Speaker, several speakers have made comparisons between Singapore and Macau. I'd like to put these comparisons in perspective. In 2011, Macau's gaming revenue was $33.5 billion, or about 92% of its GDP. Macau, and as a gaming market, Macau is more than 7 times that of Singapore. We are at no risk of being another Macau or being dependent overly on the casinos or IRs.
Addressing the social safeguards for the bill, Acting Minister for Social and Family Development Chun said the complex issue of problem gambling was best managed through the combined efforts of personal responsibility, family support and community involvement.
On its own, each effort will be limited in its impact and efficacy. On its own, each will be unable to holistically manage the complex issue of problem gambling. In the design of any social safeguards, we must not inadvertently erode the role of personal responsibility, family support, or community involvement. Second, our measures must be calibrated and targeted. Too broad or too blunt a measure will be ineffective in providing preventive assistance to the areas of greatest concern. Too fine or too narrow a measure may be resource-intensive in application, yet may not achieve results that commensurate with the efforts and resources expended.
One key concern raised by the MPs was whether the proposed visit limit would lead to an increase in gambling intensity.
I must admit that I'm not very convinced that the visit limit will be effective. And I would like to ask the Minister, what is the purpose of imposing visit limits if it's not going to curb the gambling intensity? And why offer this intermediate option if the subject is assessed to be financially vulnerable? Are there any evidences from other jurisdictions that this is going to work?
The visit limit is but one of our many things in our arsenal to deal with the problems of problem gambling. You asked whether there's evidences from other jurisdictions. Yes, we have studied the models in like the Holland casinos, and it has proven to be effective in their jurisdiction. And we'll continue to learn from other people and also to improve upon it. As you mentioned, we are indeed concerned about the issue of intensification when you put a visit limit. This is something that we will watch, and we're also closely watching the other jurisdictions' practices, and if there are other things that we can do to better our system.
There were also suggestions to impose a limit on gambling expenditure.
While we put in place rules to safeguard our people, we also do not want to end up in a situation where our people psychologically pass their personal responsibility to the state. That is, if the state limits my gambling to N visits or X amount, then I am safe to gamble within the limit without due consideration of my own personal circumstances.
Now, Parliament also passed amendments to the Road Traffic Act, making a number of changes. First, stiffer penalties for those who make illegal modifications to their cars. If found, illegally modified vehicles may now be impounded for up to 3 months.
Many drivers have told me that this penalty is quite harsh, and hence, I have no doubt it will act as an effective deterrent. Nevertheless, I feel that it should be the last resort for such offence. Public education should be always our first line of defence.
Can MOT consider empowering LTA to require owners of illegally modified cars to disclose the workshop where they obtain the illegal modifications so that they can be stopped at source? That means get information from the motorist.
They don't necessarily need to do the modifications in a workshop in Singapore. They could go elsewhere to get the modification done, in which case enforcement against the workshops would not be terribly effective. It is better to enforce against the vehicle owners themselves. And that is one reason we have targeted the owners rather than the workshops. But nonetheless, we do agree that it is important to get the workshops on board as well. And so LTA is in the midst of reviewing the enforcement and legislation against workshops.
The Road Traffic Amendment Bill will also step up security on the public bus system. Bag checks will now be authorised on public buses and in bus interchanges, similar to those done at MRT stations today. MP for Jurong GRC Ang Wei Neng supported the bill, but he pushed for more changes, specifically to ease the movement of public buses. He cited the case of private buses using bus hubs and competing with public buses in places like Tanah Merah and Clementi.
I can imagine that the difficulty in finding the appropriate sites include some residents who are living closer to those drop-off and pick-up points being quite unwilling to see those drop-off and pick-up points, because to them it may seem as an intrusion into their privacy. They don't want the vehicles to be stopping so near to where their windows are, for example. So the site constraints are actually quite real. And I think as MPs on the ground, we all know it's always good to have a facility or amenity built up as long as it's not outside my door.
I would like the ministry to consider starting at those bus stop outside its MRT station. We are quite far away from the residential area. For example, the Harbourfront, the Kranji MRT station, as well as even Lakeside for the moment is really far away from the blocks of residential blocks.
I thank Mr. Ang for his suggestion. It's a very good one.
Another change to the Road Traffic Act will widen the price differential between low and high carbon emission car models. Buyers who opt for low emission cars will get a rebate of between $5,000 and $20,000, while those who buy high emission models will have to pay a tax of the same amount. MP for Pasir Ris Punggol GRC Dr. Janil Puthucheary urged the ministry to make the CO2 emission limits stricter.
The limits set for taxation and benefits will, of course, vary from country to country. But compared to many countries, many limits for carbon emissions tax, Singapore's proposed limit of equal to or lower than 160 grams per kilometre for tax rebates is very generous. Many others will have a stricter standard of 122 grams per kilometre. What this means is that we're not as aggressive in pursuing this environmental cause, and we're going to have to do a lot of work to change consumers' mindsets and choices. In several countries, the penalty barrier is at 150 to 160 grams per kilometre. So what we are considering as the threshold between a low emissions and standard, many other countries are considering as the barrier between standard and high emissions.
We note Dr. Janil's comparison with other jurisdictions. Indeed, we're playing catch-up. But when we think about the thresholds in the future, we will also look at advances in technology as well as the progress in Singapore's overall mitigation efforts on climate change. I should add that we are introducing the CEV scheme for the first time. We believe there will be some impact, but are also mindful to give motorists time to adjust before drawing conclusions.
Moving on to question time, the Urban Redevelopment Authority will allow graffiti art to be painted on the sides of selected conserved shophouses on a case-by-case basis. This even though it had introduced stricter colour guidelines for historic shophouses in January this year. Some shophouses in Haji Lane were in the spotlight recently as they were deemed to have flouted these new rules by having murals painted on their facades. Senior Parliamentary Secretary for National Development Dr. Maliki Osman said the URA decided to allow this as the area has become a niche for commercial outlets associated with the creative community. He added the murals were also painted in themes that are appropriate to the context and character of the area.
Developing conservation guidelines that find an appropriate balance between heritage conservation and artistic expressions will always be challenging. The URA will continue to work closely with the community, professional bodies, and interest groups to refine, enhance, and clarify these guidelines over time.
Overall prices of new or built-to-order Housing and Development Board flats have increased by 12% since January 2009. This is compared to a 34% increase in the HDB Resale Price Index over the same period. National Development Minister Koh Boon Wan said the ministry has stabilised prices for BTO flats since May 2011, especially in non-mature estates. Mr. Koh added that currently, first-timers buying new flats in non-mature estates use an average of 23% of their monthly income to pay for their housing loans. He said they are able to pay for their monthly installments fully with their CPF with minimal or no cash outlay. Mr. Koh added he believes BTO flats are priced at very affordable levels.
I noted Minister's statement just now, the increase was only 12%, but to a lot of residents, I think their salary did not increase 12% over this period. Will the MND consider making BTO, especially new BTO flats, the price being stable?
When we price BTO, we take fully into account, can buyers afford it? And this is a critical factor. And if you judge by the figure that I've given, 23% of their monthly income, I think that is affordable. for BTO. I think a lot of the misunderstanding out there is they are comparing with resale price. Now, resale price is beyond my control. That's set by buyer, seller. But for first-timers buying BTO flats, that is within my control. And it is my job to ensure that it will be affordable. And if you look carefully, study our BTO prices in recent months, for non-mature estates, because that is our commitment, in the non-mature estates, there will always be flats which newlywed first-timers can afford. Supposing, let's say, they buy a 4-room flat. A 4-room flat, let's say in Sengkang or in Choa Chu Kang. The BTO price, $250,000, 251,000. It starts from 250,000. And at the highest level, highest floor, which is the maximum, 310,000. 5-room flat, starting from 320,000, maximum 385,000. So that is what we have been trying to do in the last few months, trying to stabilize these BTO prices. But over time, I hope that the resale pricing will become more moderate, and then we can adjust our prices again.
Senior Minister of State for Communications and Information Lawrence Wong has given the assurance that there are proper safeguards in place for the screening of R21 films on pay TV. Mr. Wong said R21 content is only offered as a video on demand or VOD service. TV operators must include a parental lock mechanism to prevent access by underaged viewers. The content can only be unlocked by a PIN number. The VOD service arose from a recommendation by the 2010 Censorship Review Committee, or CRC, which conducts periodic reviews of Singapore's content regulation standards and policies.
In accepting this CRC's recommendation, we had recognized the need to provide adults with mature content while at the same time protecting our young. We also recognize that VOD on pay TV allows for a higher degree of parental oversight, with the availability of an easy-to-use parental lock mechanism to prevent unauthorized access by underage viewers. VOD is also a paid service whereby consumers make a conscious choice to purchase the videos they wish to watch.
Now, authorities will investigate if MediaCorp had breached guidelines under the Television Advertising Code by showing a horror trailer during prime time. Senior Parliamentary Secretary for the Communications and Information Ministry, Sim Ann, said this in response to a question by Holland Bukit Timah GRC MP Christopher D'Souza. Mr. D'Souza had related how a 9-year-old resident had told him that she couldn't sleep after she saw the horror trailer on TV at 8 p.m. Ms. Sim Ann said that Media Development Authority's Television Advertising Code requires broadcasters to exercise care and sensitivity when showing trailers on free-to-air and subscription platforms.
On free-to-air television, trailers for films featuring violence and horror elements or are otherwise unsuitable for viewing by children cannot be aired between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. as that time belt is meant for family audiences. Trailers with stronger content can only be shown after 10 p.m. Likewise, for subscription television, trailers for content rated Parental Guidance 13, NC 16 and M18 cannot be aired on channels targeted at children. Trailers must also be scheduled appropriately.
Senior Minister of State for Defence Chun said Singapore welcomes Myanmar's participation in multilateral security forums and exercises in the region. Myanmar will participate as observers in the Asia-based military exercise Cobra Gold next year. Cobra Gold is a multilateral exercise conducted in Thailand every year, hosted by both Thailand and the United States.
These platforms provide important opportunities for regional countries and other stakeholders to engage each other in open and constructive dialogue and practical cooperation. This builds trust and promotes stable defense relations, which in turn enhance regional peace and security.
And Second Minister for Foreign Affairs, Grace Fu, said the loan of giant pandas Jia Jia and Kai Kai is a gesture of goodwill from China and serves to enhance friendly ties between both countries. She said the collaboration will raise public awareness of panda conservation through a breeding research program. Nominated MP Faizah Jamal also asked if additional charges to visit the panda exhibit can be waived for now.
To see the pandas, which to me adds up to quite a hefty sum for a family of 4. So because it's based on goodwill and good faith between the two countries, I'm wondering whether for at least this period of time before River Safari takes on board the role of looking after the pandas, whether this can be something to be taken into account in the interest of the public.
The giant panda is not separately housed, it's actually housed within the zoo. So in order to get access to it, you have to actually go through the zoo. And I think that's the reason why WRS has make that requirement to go through the zoo, pay an admission price, and on top of that there's a top-up. And the top-up, although the WRS is not under direct supervision of MFA, but from what I understand, it's really to pay for the cost of housing the panda and looking after and contributing to the conservation of the pandas.
Acting Minister for Culture, Community and Youth, Lawrence Wong, says his ministry is continually reviewing strategies to ensure that a sustainable approach is taken to maximise visitor experience in museums. He was replying to nominated MP Janice Koh's suggestion of giving Singaporeans free entry to its museums all year round. Mr. Wong added that while there have been initiatives that have increased the number of visitors, there are also relatively more visitors when there are special programs in the museums.
Visitorship is also driven by the quality of programming, and this requires significant resources to sustain. Otherwise, as we have observed in some European countries which offer free admissions, visitorship numbers can still taper off after an initial phase.
And on the issue of Singapore's national ideology, Mr. Wong said the ongoing national conversation should be able to give an update to the shared values introduced in the early 1990s. The set of 5 values, such as consensus, not conflict, and family as the basic unit of society, has served as an important point of reference for the Ministry of Education's civics and moral education curriculum from 1992. The concept stemmed from a desire to seek common values shared by the diverse communities of Singapore. It aimed to help preserve Asian identities in a period of globalization. Mr. Wong said through the Our Singapore conversation dialogue sessions held so far, it can be seen that Singaporeans care deeply about their families and about values such as graciousness, kindness and harmony. He added that while it remains to be seen if the national conversations will yield values which are different, the process is important as it lets Singaporeans forge a shared understanding of the values that will underpin Singapore's future.
When we started this process of a national conversation, we did not immediately go into policy issues and say, let's deal with policy A, B, C. But we deliberately designed the conversation so that it was more open-ended, so that Singaporeans and participants in the dialogue can share with us what are the aspirations and values that are important to them.
Parliament has been adjourned. Good night.